And good afternoon, everyone. I'd like to welcome you to another Art to Market broadcast. Pleasure to be with you all again. I'm Jason Horejs, owner of Xanadu Gallery, and this is our monthly broadcast that I do in conjunction with Barney Davey. Hey, Barney, how's it going?
Hey, Jason. Good to see you again, and great to be on another broadcast. Can't believe it's been a month. It's flown by, but thrilled to be here as always. And looking forward to this one.
This will be a great topic. We've already gotten a lot of I've gotten a lot of emails and posts on the blog that people are obviously interested in this topic. You know, ultimately, this is the $1 million question that an artist needs to answer. How do I find collectors? How do I cater to those collectors? How do I build relationships with them? So we're going to cover a lot of ground tonight, and we'll try to get to as many of your questions as we can. I should just mention while we're getting things rolling here that if you have questions during the broadcast, you can ask those questions either by emailing me at jason@xanadugallery.com. Just be sure to put in the subject line, collector question or podcast question, something that indicates to me. Or you can post a question on red.blog, which is my blog, red.blog.com. You'll see the post there. Many of you are probably watching the broadcast from there. The Q&A box, I noticed, Barney, Google's Q&A box,
Yes.
Apparently they've changed how that works. It used to be that I could just click on it and it would activate it, but it seems like now I had to have clicked on it before we started the broadcast, which I didn't do. So unfortunately, that's not going to work for us. But you can either email us or hit us on the blog.
I just make it simple. We'll make you the question meister. Send them to Jason at Xanadu Gallery, and we'll answer as many of them as we can. I didn't mention earlier that my blog is artmarketingnews.com. You can go there and find 600 plus posts on art marketing and art business. And shall we jump in today's topic?
Let's do it.
All right. We came up with this one because we realized that things have changed in the market over the last few years. Changing consumer habits, the internet, the fact that there are fewer galleries, there aren't enough galleries to go around. Let's just put it that way. There are more artists than there are galleries. So the idea of being able to make a full-time career just by having your work hanging in a gallery is a difficult, if not nearly impossible proposition, especially for artists who don't have a body of work and aren't already dealing with a handful or more of established galleries that can really move their art for them. So what does that mean? That means that you have to find a way to get your work sold, to get your work to market. That's what our broadcast, we've named it Art to Market. We want to help you find ways to get your art sold. And we believe, and this is almost a dichotomy for Jason because he is a gallery owner, a successful gallery owner, but we believe that artists need to develop direct buying relationships with collectors and art buyers. And I'll make a quick distinction, in my opinion, the difference between an art buyer and an art collector. An art buyer is somebody who buys art for a need, an immediate need. It's usually related to It's usually related to a design scheme. They've redone a room. They've bought a new home. They have need for art on the wall or in a space somewhere. But they're not art buyers. They're not collectors. So that's somebody who's buying art for the immediate need. A collector is somebody who's interested in art. They take a vacation to Scottsdale and they make a point to go on the art walk and spend time in galleries and get to know artists, and they like to know way more about art and artists than a buyer does. Those are the people that you want to try to collect or cultivate, because they will collect your art. They'll buy 2 or 3 pieces from you. In my book, Guerrilla Marketing for Artists, the subtitle is How 100 Collectors Can Bulletproof Your Career. And I came up with that thought about 100 collectors, thinking, I've heard it said many times, and this is just an average. Your mileage may vary, but the average artist can make about 1,000 pieces in a lifetime. That's 33 originals a year over a 30-year span. It sounds like a believable, doable number. Of course, when you got started, how productive you are, those things can change. But on average, if you can make 1,000 originals in a lifetime, I contend that if you can get 100 collectors or more, that they'll buy 3 to 5 pieces from you each. On average, that's a third to a half of your entire body of work going to collectors that you have a direct relationship with, and that puts you out of harm's way when galleries close, Facebook changes their terms of service, or something else happens to a distribution channel that you don't have control over. This gives you control over how to kind of bulletproof your career and make the premium dollar on your sales. So with that in mind, Jason and I decided let's talk about how to find art collectors. They're out there everywhere. Artists have a hard time believing that when I say it, but they are. You just have to look for them. You have to know how to go about looking for them. And obviously, if you're in a niche, there we go, niche. If you're in a niche, like say you paint horses, you're an equine artist, it's going to be a lot easier to identify the people who are your potential prospects than if you're a landscape artist. It doesn't mean that it's impossible if you're a landscape artist. It just means you have to be maybe a little bit more creative in going in how you go about it. But that's kind of lays the groundwork. And
yeah, and I just going back to a couple of things that you mentioned, Barney. One, you talked about the difference between art buyers and collectors, and kind of getting the definition of collectors. And I agree with exactly what you said. I though tend to think in this way: when someone comes into my gallery, obviously I'm going to provide as much service as possible, no matter what their need is and why they're there to buy artwork. But even more, certainly I have people come in who are seasoned art collectors who buy for the love of buying. And then I have those people who are coming in to buy for a need. And in thinking about them and how I work with them and treat them, I look at it at the two categories, not as collector and art buyer, but instead as collector and future art collector. Because I feel like those buyers, the fact that they are interested in art, that they see a need for having art, that makes them some of your very best future prospective collectors. And I would encourage artists to kind of think in that same way, that anyone that you're interacting with, and certainly anyone who's buying art from you, they are definitely the best potential base of future collectors for you. Once someone has bought from you once, they are far more likely to buy from you in the future than someone who's just discovering your art for the first time. And so, when we talk about this, finding collectors and where to get them, and as Barney said, they can come from anywhere. You should be looking through colored glasses and kind of seeing everyone as a potential buyer. And obviously, we're going to get a lot more specific about how to seek out those people who are more likely to become buyers and then future collectors. But I think that's kind of an important way to think about it, is that you've got to get someone to buy before you can get them to collect. And so we need to find the various pathways to get them to do that. Then the other note is, as Barney mentioned, it is somewhat ironic that as a gallery owner, I'd be telling you, you need to go out and find some of your own collectors and build relationships when I'm in the business of doing exactly that. But as Barney mentioned, it's a very competitive art market. And even further than that, I would say to you that my very best, the very best artists that I represent, the ones that I sell the most of and have the best relationships with, many of them are doing exactly what we're going to be talking about tonight. And that is, they are out there promoting themselves and building relationships with a collector base, cultivating that. And that benefits them, but it also ultimately benefits the galleries that have relationships with them, because those collectors, much like groupies, tend to follow the artists around as they're participating in either art festivals, art shows, or in gallery openings. And so it's a huge benefit for everyone involved to be cultivating those relationships. And so Barney's right. The art market has changed dramatically. The internet has made it possible and easier. It's facilitated the building of those kind of collector relationships. And so we all have to be working 100% all of the time to generate those relationships so that we can all build a successful future together.
Thank you for making that distinction about art buyers and art collectors in the terms of, in the thought of that an art buyer is a potential future art collector. That's a great attitude to have for anybody who's selling art, whether you're a gallery owner like you are, or an artist. If you look at somebody and don't make a judgment on them that you're a one-time art buyer, because if you do what we tell you to do all the time, which is, if you listen to any of our past webinars or workshops here, we've talked about email marketing and blogging and self-promotion and press releases and publicity and advertising. All of those things are about delivering a message, building a list or a community or a tribe around you, and then communicating to them in a way that's informative and educational or entertaining, whatever the case might be. So great if you can do a mix of all those things so that you keep people on your list, and when they have a need and have the discretionary income to do something with it, that they'll buy art from you. So moving towards that collector base and not prejudging people is something that will be powerful for you, in my opinion. And to play off something else that you mentioned, Jason, and in talking about art is all around you, one of the things that I talk about in my currently closed art marketing mastery workshop is that you can, the best people, the easiest people to sell are the people that you know. It's easier to sell to someone you know than someone you don't. It's just true. People buy from people they know. They like, trust are the three words you need to think about. You know, if you already have someone who knows you, then you should be letting them know that you have art for sale. Maybe your art isn't what they need. Maybe you're abstract and they're Southwest. But if they know you're abstract and happen to like what you do, it just doesn't fit what they need, they very likely know someone who does. So they may not be an immediate first degree purchase for you, but they could be a second degree purchase for you. It's said that an average person knows about 150 people. If that's you, you could sit down and start writing a list of the 150 people you know, and then ask yourself, how many of them know that I sell art? How many of them have seen my art? How many of them have referred people to me? I guarantee you there's money in that list if you start working it and thinking about it. You don't need to be obnoxious about it. To me, it would be easier to ask someone you know to take a look at your art than a total stone cold stranger. But people are sometimes a little bit shy about that. Don't be. You should be. You're making art. You're doing something creative. You're adding beauty and interest to the world. Be proud of that and find a way to gracefully talk to other people about it so that you feel comfortable in doing it, and that you're not feeling like some pushy salesperson, which you're not. You just want to introduce your art to the world, and the people closest to you are your best prospects. The people that they know are your next best prospects. Start there. There's a huge warm market right there wherever you are, no matter if you're living in a small city or not. The people you know may be a long way away from you, but that doesn't mean that you can't get introductions to them or to the people they know by just working on it.
On that point, and again, I'm going to completely agree that people who are in your circle of influence or who are in their circle of influence are a great place to start. And you know, as Barney said, it doesn't have to be something that's pushy. Several of the artists that I work with are really good at introducing their art to people that they know and kind of building relationships. And again, not in a salesy or pushy kind of way, but for example, Dave Newman is an artist that I work with, and I've mentioned many times in previous broadcasts. He every year will have a big party at his studio, and it's not an open studio tour or anything formal like that. It's just an evening where he invites friends and acquaintances, and people gather in his studio, and he'll have a small live band there playing. Again, members of the band's a friend of his. It's kind of more jam than real formal performance. But everybody just gets together, mixes and mingles in his studio. And of course, there's art all around, and there's an opportunity to see all of that art, but that's not the main focus or purpose of why people are there. However, inevitably, those conversations are going to get started. And, I know it's been the case that, certainly those people who've been there ultimately have ended up acquiring art by Dave, partly because they've had a chance to see it, partly because they've built a deeper, richer relationship with him. And so if I were to think of, kind of step one, as Barney's already mentioned, reaching out to the group of people that kind of the corollary to that first step is then giving them opportunities to see your work and being social and mixing with people. And you might even ask, as you're inviting someone to an open studio, do you have any friends or colleagues who you feel might be interested in my artwork, who might like to come to this event? And let them know it's not going to be a sales event. It's just going to be a casual evening. But, I'd love to meet new people and introduce them to my art and to my friends and just kind of build off of those kind of experiences. That said, I said that wasn't a formal open studio tour, but I do think that open studio tours that are put on by your local arts organization are a great structured way to be able to get that same kind of effect. And so anything that you can do to get people into your studio and kind of leverage your local market that way can be a great way to start building some relationships with potential future collectors.
You mentioned there talking, asking for referrals in a very, again, not pushy way. I'm not a pushy person. I was a successful salesperson making well over 6 figures for 25, close to 30 years. And I did it because I had good relationships with people. And it was similar to what we're talking about in terms of artists and developing relationships and people buying from you because they know you and they like you and they trust you. I worked really hard at that with my customers when I was selling advertising and trade show space in half a dozen or more different markets, all simultaneously in a huge market. For me, I had to have that kind of relationship because when you sell advertising, it's year in and year out. It's not a hit in one big sale and never see you again. You're going to be buying from me if I'm successful monthly, and I'm going to be coming back to you annually and saying the prices are going up. We'd love to have you back in at a 12-time rate and so forth. The only way you can do that and be successful is have a good relationship with somebody. I digress. I wasn't pushy, but I was helpful and friendly. Some of the best artists that I've known always are prepared. I mentioned we talked about self-promotion before, and I know I've told this story, but if you should be prepared. You should have 6x9 cards, some kind of brochure, some kind of printed material, as well as a page, maybe a landing page or a quick short link that you can send somebody to, and arm those people who know you, who would like to help you. There's a lot of people out there who would love to help you. You just need to ask them. You need to say, I would love to, I'm really working hard at enlarging the number of people who know about my art. And if you could help me, if you know anybody, I would be honored if you do that. And here's some material, here's some cards, or I'm doing this show, and if you have anyone that you think would be interested, I'd love to have them as a guest to come. Give them some material, give them some weapons in the form of, I think 6x9 cards or brochures, or even a shortcut landing page. If you see, I created a little shortcut down there, bdavey.co/find. That goes to an article I wrote called 36 ways to find art collectors on the cheap. But anyway, so help those people, provide materials to them, give them some incentive, tell them why you're asking them to do that, what you want from it. And then additionally, if you have in the same breath practically say, in return, if there's ever anything I can do to help you, if there's ways I can help you promote your business or do something for you, I'm there for you. You want me to show up and do, paint at do a demonstration or do a little talk? Of course, you have to be comfortable being willing to do that kind of thing. Some artists aren't. But if you are, that you can reciprocate. And when you start doing that, you start building these tremendous ties and relationships. And actually, the whole thing becomes fun, and you'll start wanting to do more of it because you'll see that you get a really good payback from it. And it's something that you not only get a payback from, but you feel good about doing. Like, I'm really making this happen in my career. And all you've done, what you spent on that is energy and breath. We're not talking about any transaction of big dollars or running ads on Facebook or in art magazines. It's just what the proverbial term low-hanging fruit. It's right there in front of you.
And of course, I'm sure that a lot of artists in attendance will say, okay, well, I agree with that. I've already reached out to my local audience and or my circle of influence, and I do have some collectors there, but I've maybe burned through that, or I've worked my way through that. It is what it is. I'm continuing to work on it. I need to kind of step it up and start bringing in some collectors who maybe aren't in my circle of influence. And I want to find some new collectors and new buyers, and kind of start increasing the number of people who know about my work. And I think this is a critical principle, and certainly in my business, it's one that we're always thinking about. And that is that to a certain extent, as with any business, the art business is certainly a numbers game where you've got to have enough people being exposed to and seeing your artwork in order to reach that percentage of people who are going to be qualified, and by that I mean have the funds available to them, the disposable income to be able to buy your artwork, and they're going to be interested in the subject matter that you're pursuing and your style, and so that you can start to build a relationship with them. And so it's an exciting time that we're living in, that your ability to reach out and expand the exposure of your work and to reach a much broader audience, again, because of the internet and social media, has certainly increased. And and we'll have a few of these questions later on this evening, but a lot of artists are curious about social media and how they might reach out to new collectors, how they could leverage their website to reach new buyers. And so let's spend a few minutes talking about that. And it's a little bit difficult, just in the sense that we're still so much in the early phases of marketing through social media. Our gallery is definitely leveraging social media and primarily Facebook, but we're also starting to push out into Pinterest and Twitter and all the other social media. And even though it's challenging, the opportunity that's there is just huge. Billions of people, literally billions of people, are on social media, and that means that your future potential buyers are likely out there right now using these social media tools in some fashion. And so if you can find a way to reach out to them and get to them, that can be incredibly powerful. And we've talked a little bit about using Facebook and other social media before. What we're finding to be very effective, and we're kind of in a new phase of advertising on social media. But if you look at Facebook, they offer tools that give you the opportunity to target your existing email list. You can input your email list and it will find those users on Facebook and give you an opportunity to put your artwork in front of them. So again, kind of leveraging your existing interested potential collectors or existing collectors. And then the other thing that you can do is target people who have visited your website. So, you know, if it's a social, and we won't probably get too much into the mechanics of doing this, but Facebook has great documentation on how to retarget people who have visited your website. And it's pretty amazing. You put a pixel from Facebook onto your website, and then people visit your website, it records that visit. And when they go onto Facebook, you then have the opportunity to put a piece of your artwork in front of them. Incredibly powerful to get the kind of repeat exposure that you need to get in order for people to become familiar with your work and ultimately to make a buying decision. So that's one possibility. Sharing your work on Pinterest. You know, it's amazing to me. We'll post a painting or a sculpture on Pinterest, and it's amazing to see how that gets shared and where it gets spread around and how many times it gets pinned. Demographically, Pinterest holds a lot of interest for us. We're still working on figuring out the paid advertising on Pinterest, but just in terms of kind of a viral expansion of showing your work around can be very effective. So it's an interesting and brave new world. And Barney, maybe you have some comments on social media and that approach to getting new collectors.
I do. It was a perfect segue to or maybe you just jarred my thinking on it. And that is that what's happening with social media is your potential customers, and you're doing this and I'm doing this, are sharing little bits of our lives with particularly Facebook, but also on LinkedIn, on Google Plus, and on Pinterest. If you like something, or if you pin something, or you click a like button, that tells Facebook a little bit about you. And ultimately, it's sort of what you're talking about. You get to refine your audience in a way that in the past, advertising didn't work that way. When I sold advertising, let's say Decor magazine was a magazine for art and picture framing retailers. We knew we had about 30,000 of them, but I had no way of knowing or proving, other than the old time bingo cards, which was a postcard which is you put a circle around and you send it in and hoping that the advertiser would send you some literature. You know, that was a 3-month tour to get some literature into somebody's hand. Now this can happen immediately, but so you have the ability to segment by interest, but also if you look, you can search for groups on LinkedIn, on Google Plus, and on Facebook for people that have said, yes, here's an interest group for you know, people who like Cairn Terrier dogs, or they like German Shepherd dogs. And if you're creating art that's like that, then you should be hanging out in those groups. You don't just jump in the group and start spamming everybody with pictures of your dogs. You become an active member of the community, identify who the people are who within that community, who are potentially your best prospects, and then do your best to get to know them in some way other than, hey, I'm an artist, buy some stuff from me. It doesn't work that way. It goes back to know, like, trust. You develop a relationship with people. This sounds harder in some ways than just broadcasting out a bunch of email and hoping that, or, you know, broadcasting a bunch of ads and hoping that something will happen. And in some ways it is, because you have to actually dig and work for it, but the results can be fantastic. And what it really comes down to is you can actually identify a potential collector, somebody. That person is very, based on everything I've been able to tell about their activity online, the groups they belong to, the comments they make within the groups, or the comments they make on their page, they're a high probability prospect that they're going to buy from you. Use these tools to get to know them and be genuine and authentic about it. Don't be a schmuck. Just be friendly, be helpful, contribute to the group in other ways so that you get recognized for being a part of the community that cares and is interested in the community, and you'll get paid back in terms of people buying your art. And once that starts working for you a little bit, then it can snowball on you, where some of those people are going to help you build your relationship by introducing you to other people. All kinds of fantastic things can happen. So you can use it for research, and you can actually boil it down and start finding people who are really great prospects for you. The internet's a wonderful thing, powerful tool.
And I don't want to, and I want to be careful to make sure that you don't think that we're saying, hey, it's easy to find collectors on social media. It's easy to get them to your website. It's easy to build these relationships. Nothing in the art business, it seems, is ever all that easy. It takes time and it takes effort. But I definitely feel we've made an investment in using social media, and we've seen sales come from our efforts on Facebook. Haven't seen any from Pinterest yet. We're still building that side of the social media platform. But I'm confident that there are opportunities there, and so we're investing both resources and our time to have a presence in social media, and figuring out our strategy and what images we want to be pushing out, and also what kind of stories we want to be telling, how we want to be engaging with collectors. And I would encourage you, as you're thinking about how your outreach in social media, from your personal page or from your Facebook business page, think about ways to engage with your followers, not just pushing images out and kind of implying that, hey, you should buy this, but instead think about the stories that you can tell about the artwork, your experiences that you can share, ways that you can build personal relationships. And I think, that probably starts to get us into the whole sales process, and we're not necessarily here to talk about that tonight, but just thinking about what you can do to leverage those relationships that you're beginning to build. In a lot of ways, social media is really just a virtual extension and an opportunity to reach a much broader audience than you would have in your personal physical life. But a lot of the same rules would apply to you there that apply if you're at a studio party or at some other kind of event.
It's not just social media too. So just to be clear, because we talked a little bit earlier about local or warm marketing, but there's also meetup groups. I've mentioned several times in the Phoenix area where Jason and I both live. There are a couple of meetup groups. In Meetup, I think it's meetup.org, I believe, or maybe.com. If you've never been there before, it's a fantastic website that brings together people who have an interest in a certain topic. It could be raising dogs, racing cars, or I've mentioned a couple of different groups. There's the Phoenix Art Explorers that has 800 members and very active. They go to museums, they go to the Philharmonic, they do gallery openings. And one of our local Western bars that's been around for almost a century's closing. They're going there. They go hang out with each other. And there's another one called the PALS, Phoenix Art Lovers Society, and it's a similar kind of thing. And I think they have a similar membership of 700 or 800 people that belong. You can actually get involved in an organization like that, and you're guaranteed to be amongst people who are far more likely to buy your art than just going out to a ball game. Or I never advocate going to just a Chamber of Commerce mixer or something like that and hoping you're going to find an art gallery, or pardon me, an art buyer. So you can do this in the physical world, and you can do it in the online world. It's all the same. It's about getting people to know you to begin with. If they know you, know who they are, know who you are, then they can get to know your art, and then they can buy your art. It sounds like a multi-step process, but this isn't just artists. This is small businesses of any sort. You have to start somewhere and build relationships with people. So, and
I think what we're kind of saying is, at least the first part of what we're talking about tonight is get out there. The idea of an artist being locked away in her studio and creating 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. You know, truthfully, that was never a model that was very successful, but even less so now. It's incumbent on you to be out there and mixing and building relationships and looking for opportunities.
You're running a small business. Part of that means that somebody has to be in charge of finding customers. You're like most artists, you're a solopreneur, or maybe you've got a partner or somebody else. Somebody has to be in charge of doing that. In most cases, it's going to be you. If you're an introvert, get the book Networking for Introverts. It's an excellent book. That's not a reason not to do that. It's because you can overcome it. It may mean that you have to get out of your comfort zone more than somebody who's an extrovert, but it's not. It doesn't give you the right to sit at home and feel sorry for yourself. You can get out there and do this no matter what your personality type is. And frankly, if you get out of the studio and get with people, it's invigorating. You might find that it's actually fun. And you don't go out there necessarily with the first idea in mind that I'm here first and foremost to sell my art. That's a result of some other things that you do. So go in mind that I'm going to have some fun and meet some people. The rest of it will fall into place for you if you're consistent with just the action of, like Jason said, get out there.
Now, one other way that I think of finding new collectors and prospecting them, and this is one that we've used in the gallery, and this is a more old-fashioned one, a little lower technology, and that is direct mail. We've used direct mail very effectively over the years to build relationships with collectors, either by sending out invitations to events if we're targeting local potential collectors, so sending out an invitation to a show. And then we also have our catalog that we email out to our existing mailing list, and then we purchase demographically selected homes, some of them local, and then we've also done physical mailings, direct mailings, to markets where we have a lot of existing collectors and kind of get a sense that there are other potential buyers there. And, you know, direct mail has a bit of a bad name because, you know, who wants junk mail? No one does. And for a while, and you know, certainly 10, 15 years ago, I think it was a pretty common gripe that everyone would go out, open their mailbox, and it would just be crammed and stuffed with all kinds of junk. And the likelihood, I think, at that point of getting any attention, especially for art, which is a little bit more low key, was pretty low. But what's interesting and what we've seen is that as the as the internet has come of age, as email marketing and internet marketing in general have kind of taken over a lot of the marketing efforts of other companies, the mailboxes have emptied out a little bit, and you'd probably notice yourself that you're still getting junk mail, make no mistake about it, but you're probably getting less of it than you were 10, 15 years ago. And that presents an opportunity. You know, now a lot of the noise has shifted online. And so if I can put something beautiful and eye-catching physically in your hands, we feel like that's a pretty good way to reach a potential audience. And so we could certainly do an entire broadcast just talking about that direct marketing, but I just want to plant the seed there and have you start thinking about that possibility. You know, you can go to a company like Info USA, or there are many other direct marketing mailing list providers, and you can select in your area, which it would probably be where I'd recommend that you start in your local area. Find the demographics, what the home values are, what the income values are, and create mail pieces that give you an opportunity, again, to put your artwork out in front of a greater number of potential collectors. So there's another idea to throw out there in terms of reaching out to bring additional collectors, you know, kind of into knowing about your artwork and becoming familiar with you. One last note on that: if you're going to do it, don't think, I'm just going to send out a postcard and see how it does and see what the reaction is and see if I sell anything. Because the likelihood, and what we've found, is that it takes numerous repetitions of them seeing the artwork and seeing your name in order to start to get some results. And so if you're going to do that, or if you're going to do magazine advertising, you've got to be thinking in terms of repetition. And that is, again, that's definitely going to take more of an investment financially on your part than some of the other grassroots, down and dirty guerrilla things that we've been talking about. But I would at least keep that option in mind if you're trying to get people to a studio tour, or if you just like to get broader recognition in your local market.
The idea of repetition is key there. I believe that you ought to have 2 or 3 events in the course of a year, not more than that if you're a solo practitioner, that you focus on, so that you don't just buy a list and send to it with no intent other than I'm sending to it. You buy a list and send to it because you've got something going on and you're trying to generate buzz and interest for it, and you try and layer on top of that, in addition to buying physical mailing lists or postal mailing lists, you could look to see if there are local, you could look for dedicated email lists where maybe there's a magazine or some other kind of medium, possibly a blogger, who knows, somebody who's reaching an audience that's demographically appealing to you. Again, I'll go back to, horses, for instance. Maybe somebody's writing about horses in a way, and you could talk to them about doing a guest blog for one thing, or you could talk to them about, would you do a mail for me and a dedicated email for me for this event, and I'll pay you a flat fee, similar to buying a list from like Info USA, a mailing list broker. So
that is the difference often with email lists. With Info USA, they send you a file with all of the addresses, and you can use that then to send out your mailings. With a mailing list, you're not going to be able to get permanent access to the list. Instead, you're going to have whoever's selling it send it out for you. There are privacy issues, obviously, with email addresses. People are more likely to be offended if they know that their email address is being passed on than they would with their
illegal
address. Yes. Yeah, exactly.
U.S. and Canadian spam laws. So, and it's just bad ethics. But if I don't do this personally, but you and I both, Jason, have bought dedicated email lists in the past from other suppliers. Yeah, there's nothing wrong with somebody who wants to use their list in that way to mail out for someone on behalf of somebody else, and it's dedicated, meaning there's no other advertising. It's just purely a message about you and your company and your art. It's something to look into. I wouldn't spend a whole lot of time on it because there's so many other better ways, and I think, to try to market than maybe dedicated email blasts. But if you start lining up all these potential avenues or tools that you can use, and then think about, how do I point them all in the same direction for a greater purpose, and layer in your messages so that you're sending out email marketing, you're sending out postcards, maybe you're doing some publicity, and you're getting those messages one on top of the other, all pointed at something. Now you're creating a synergy where the sum of the parts is greater than the sum of the whole, and that's how you maximize a relatively modest marketing budget into something that's far more powerful than just sending out to an email list. I'm sure you do that with your email list, Jason. You have, when you do your mail, if you buy a list, you're trying to generate interest for a particular show or some event at the gallery that you want to let people know about.
Yes, I mean, that is true. We definitely do that. Although I'll say we do also just send pure marketing pieces where it's not event related, where we're trying to build up a familiarity with that person, with the artwork. The catalog that we produce is an example of that, where it's not necessarily event related. It's just putting something out there that they can see a variety of different work and potentially buy. And we've had great, I mean, we just sold a couple of pieces earlier this week from buyers who had never been in our gallery, who bought off of the catalog, and they were addresses that we had purchased. They'd never been into the gallery. So, that said, we I have the latitude to experiment a little bit and to make some investments that may be too risky for an individual artist to make. And so we're always trying new things and seeing what's going to result in bringing collectors to us. And I think that that kind of leads into kind of the next phase. And I know we're quickly coming to the end and we want to get to some questions, but we've kind of been talking about how you can go out and seek out collectors, either from people that you know or social media, mailing to them, and reaching out that way. But I think it's also important, and it would be ridiculous not to also talk about how you can get people to come to you or to come to your work. And that is to go places where those collectors are going to be. And so a great example of that would be art shows or art festivals. And I know many artists who've built very successful careers, or at least have launched very successful careers doing the show circuits and spending time out there on the road. And believe me, I know how much work it is, and how some of those shows work and some don't. But if you think about this effort that you're making to make people familiar with your artwork, it kind of makes sense to spend some time in places where you're not having to go out and find people. They're coming to you, and the shows are a great example of that. Galleries would be another example of places where the collectors are coming to me instead of me having to go out and find those collectors. And so, Barney mentioned in the beginning that it is harder to get into galleries than it's been. That doesn't mean you shouldn't be working towards that and looking for those opportunities. And, it may not even be galleries like mine in a major art market where collectors are flying in from all over the world to see art. It may be in a smaller market or even in your local area. I think my suggestion to you would be, especially as you're in the early phases of your career and really trying to ramp up your sales and begin to build some success, is that you should be doing a little bit of everything, and being strategic about it, obviously, trying to put your efforts in those things that are going to bring the greatest results. And with that, I would agree with kind of looking over everything we've talked about. I think that the two things that I would suggest for someone early in their career would be what Barney suggested, reaching out to the people that kind of your warm market of relationships and their relationships, and building referrals. And then the second one would be the shows and festivals. That those two things offer the greatest opportunities for a broad reach and a deep reach of collectors. And if you're participating in shows and festivals, you have two goals. Goal number one, obviously, is to sell, but goal number two is to build your relationships and build your mailing list. And so I would work hard and I would take advantage of those opportunities with an eye toward the time that you can then be cultivating the relationships with collectors and ultimately potentially showing in galleries.
Should we jump into some questions? I hate to leave people.
We should definitely get into some of the questions. And again, if you have questions that you'd like to ask about collectors or anything that we've talked about tonight, you can email them to me, Jason, at xanadugallery.com. Just be sure and indicate in the subject line that this is a question for the podcast or a collector question. Or you can leave questions on the chat window on red.blog where this video is streaming. And let me hop in and we'll take a couple of questions first that were emailed in previously. And I think these are good because they kind of get into some specific questions. This one comes from Anne-Marie Landry. And Anne-Marie lives in the New Orleans area, and she says, how do you find people who want your specific type of art? And she says, I know this seems like a keep working at it and you'll find them kind of question, but she says, I do abstract work and I have a hard time selling that in New Orleans. I also can create kind of touristy art and I sell that better, but how would I get out and sell the abstract art that I'm more interested in creating?
That's a good question. And it's one of the ones it goes in line with what I mentioned at the outset, that if you're in a definable niche, like you do wine art, or you do pet portraits or something like that, it's easier to look for people. So I think in that case, you start looking at demographics. Who's your particular, who is the ideal buyer? Is it a female, or is it a male? What age? Are they 35? Are they 45 to 55? Do they have a certain income? Do they have certain activities that they're more likely to be involved with? Like are they more likely to be volunteers on certain organizations? Do they go to certain cultural events? If you start really thinking about it, and if you've been selling some art and paying attention and have some idea who it is that's buying your art, it'll inform your decisions. But there is a way to start winnowing down the overall general population to a much smaller group of people who are your most likely prospects, and work at it from that angle. And if you do that, and again, come back to getting involved in groups where your best possible prospects are within those groups, that's how you can begin to become known to people who would be interested in selling or purchasing abstract art. Jason, you probably have some other thoughts about it.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think that's a great suggestion in thinking about, okay, who has bought my work in the past? How can I find people similar to those people? Again, going back to the suggestion I made just a few minutes ago of participating in shows and art festivals where maybe there's an emphasis on abstract work, where you could expect that the people drawn to that show would be more likely to be interested in it. And that may mean, you mentioned that you're in New Orleans and you feel like maybe there isn't as strong an audience there. It's going to be the case that sometimes where you live just isn't going to have the base of potential collectors that you need for your style of work. And goodness, I mean, this is true in many markets. If you're a cowboy artist in New York City, even though there are a lot of great art collectors and galleries in New York City, potentially you're going to have a harder time finding collectors who are interested in your subject matter than you would if you were showing in the Southwest, or in the West in general. And so, you've got to be willing to reach outside of your local area. And I know, again, that requires investment and time and energy. But what I would want to be really careful for any artist is that they're not spinning their wheels in futility in an area where they're just not going to have, there isn't a broad enough audience to give them the success that they need. And so if you are doing abstract work or kind of maybe cutting edge contemporary work, and you're in a very conservative area, it makes sense to reach out and spend your time and effort getting into markets that can support that kind of work. Far better for you to make that investment and reach the audience that can appreciate and will buy your artwork than not spending any money, but just being stuck in a market where you're never going to see the potential return on the investment. And so for this particular artist, it might be the case that she is creating the quote touristy artwork and selling that, and that's supplementing her efforts to then get her contemporary abstract work out into a broader market and hopefully beginning to generate some sales to then be able to step back from the work that she's not as interested in creating.
I would just throw in there, interior designers tend to, especially those who are working in doing public spaces, often tend to go toward abstract art because it's non-representational, it's non-confrontational, and it's not controversial. So it fills a need in a space in a way that doesn't detract from everything else that we're doing. It adds beauty in its own unique way, but without being representational. So I think for many abstract artists that interior designers are or art consultants who typically work on the bigger projects and then seek out artists for that project are great prospects for someone who's doing abstract art.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great suggestion. You know, you don't have to necessarily go straight to the collector. There are many intermediaries, and you know, as we were talking before, collectors go to designers and ask for help in creating public spaces. They ask for help in creating private spaces as well. So I think that's building relationships with designers is a great suggestion. One of the other questions, this one comes from Jan. She asked, do you find that collectors pick out their own artwork, or do their interior decorators do it for them? So that's kind of a great segue into that question. And I think the answer is yes.
That is exactly right. We've known each other too long, Jason, because that's exactly what I was going to say. Yes. Yeah.
Some collectors are interested in controlling their own collection. They want to buy what they're interested in. And again, I guess it comes back to the discussion we were having earlier about the difference between a collector and a buyer. Some art buyers are nervous about buying artwork. They want to make sure it's going to fit into their space. They don't care so much about having something that's original or that's you know, speaks uniquely to them. And those buyers tend to trust their designers. And I have a lot of buyers who come in with a decorator or a designer, and the designer says, you need to have this piece and that piece and the one over there. And the buyer says, okay, how much? And very much trusts the eye of that designer, that decorator. And so I think it makes sense to definitely be cultivating the opportunities and relationships with decorators. But that's not every buyer. You know, some buyers do want to be more in control of their own art buying. They'll have the designer help with everything else in the home, but when it comes to the art, they want to bring their own art in.
It just speaks to the need to be flexible and open to whatever the opportunity is. Just you want to react in the most positive way to whatever's being presented to you. We'll work with the designer, work with the artist, or work with the buyer. It's all good to you. They're interested in your work. So just make it available, be friendly, be helpful, and informative, whatever you can do to push the sale along.
Jan also asks, do collectors tend to select paintings from only one genre? Do collectors tend to buy from a single gallery, or do they buy from multiple galleries?
Should we go back to yes on that? It's you're not going to find you're not going to find a single scenario that one size fits all in this kind of case. You just need to be open to the opportunities, be aware of them, however they're being presented to you, so that if you have relationships with designers, then it's very possible that I worked in a gallery in Scottsdale that catered to the design trade. It was open to the public, but its primary purpose was we sell to designers, and it was all across the board. We'd have designers that would come in and buy art and go put it in a room along with all the other things they've done, and the buyer, their customer, would come and say, yeah, I like it all except that one piece. It's too expensive for the kitchen. My kids are going to throw oatmeal on it. I can't do that. And then we'd have other situations where the designer would send in the customer with some thoughts on, I would show them this artist and this artist and this artist. We're looking for these particular size, you know, a range on the size, and we'd help that designer's collector, or pardon me, that designer's buyer choose some art, and they would pay full price for it, and we would then remit back to the designer, and everybody knew what was going on. Nobody was being hoodwinked there. The person buying the art realized that their designer, in these cases, was part of how they earned their pay for offering the design service. Was they got a commission on things that were purchased when they were referred to us. So it's all good. You just don't overthink it. Just get out there and start doing it.
Yeah, and Jane kind of asks about do collectors tend to buy from just one artist or multiple artists? It's interesting because I've seen it both ways. Just a couple of weeks ago, I had some collectors in the gallery, and I ended up selling them 6 pieces by one artist, and they were actually a little bit concerned about that because they said, "Oh, we don't want to have too much of any one artist in our home. We like to kind of mix it up." But they liked all 6 of these pieces, and they were different enough from one another that they could make it work. And so that wasn't an issue. And I actually see that with some frequency, people saying, I don't want to buy too much of any one artist. But on the other hand, I have some collectors who have 30 or 40 pieces by a single artist. And so if I were an artist and I had someone buy a piece of my art, it's going to benefit me to think, well, potentially this person could buy many, many more pieces of my art. And that's how I would proceed to build my relationship and work with them, not being afraid that sometime they're going to cut you off. There may be some buyers who will tell you, I'm only interested in having a piece or 2 of yours. But unless they explicitly tell you that, I would assume that they have the potential to buy many, many pieces from you over time. And working under that assumption, I'd continue marketing and promoting work to them. And sometimes it's years between one purchase and the next. And so you never want to give up on a collector. You want to just keep building that relationship. As we said, the best potential future customer is one that's already bought from you. That's a similar question. Looks, Barney, actually we've covered a lot of these questions. I have a question from Bill that says, my question is, he wants to get some ideas about building a sales funnel to attract art collectors with Facebook ads as a catalyst. And I think that's an interesting word that Bill used, a funnel for art collectors. And it's a concept that we haven't really talked about tonight, but in essence, you don't really have to necessarily, whether it's social media or email, you don't have to be making a hard sale right out the gate to try and sell them artwork. You can often, in an effort to build the relationship, you can entice them into a relationship with you by offering other things. So, for example, you might offer a collector's guide on how to hang artwork, or a collector's guide on how to find the perfect piece of artwork. Well, if they're interested, they may take that and friend you or follow you on Facebook. And that gives you, that's what he's talking about in terms of the funnel. Now you've got this bigger group of people, but you already know that they're potentially interested in being collectors because they expressed interest by downloading your article or whatever it was that you gave them. Or shoot, it could just be a screensaver, one of your images. And then you can kind of leverage that to be more effective in your advertising. Now you're only advertising to that small group of people and showing them images of your work in an effort to market to them. Goodness, Barney, I think we should talk about that in a whole other broadcast.
I would agree. Bill, sounds like Bill's been studying internet marketing techniques, and that's fantastic. And a funnel is what it sounds like. It starts at the top. It's broad, and that's where anybody almost is a prospect, and you can keep narrowing down until you've got a sale at the bottom of the funnel, where just a collector falls out or an art buyer falls out of the bottom of the funnel. And it's becoming a predominant way of doing marketing for all kinds of people, not just internet marketers, but artists can use it. I've seen case studies on orthodontists and financial planners. We don't, you're right, Jason, we're out of time as it is, and that's a huge topic that I think we should tackle at some future point. But the essence of it is this with funnel marketing or any kind of marketing, and that is you have to get to know somebody before you ask them out. Generally, you don't walk up to somebody at an event or in a bar and say, "Would you like to marry me?" You get to know them, let them get to know you, and then progress through a relationship. And that's kind of what a funnel does. And in a sense, that's what we've been talking about all along here. know, like, trust. Get people to know you first. As they get to know you, they'll like you. They'll get to know about your art, and then they'll trust that that you're a good source to buy art from. So it's a process. Things just don't happen. You were lucky, Jason, I think, and I'm really happy for you that you sent out your catalog and popped a couple of sales off of a list that's cold. But I don't I don't think you can count on that happening every time.
No, and actually, I should be clear, because that's not exactly what happened, because we bought this list a year ago, or it's been longer than that. So obviously, we've been sending out to our existing collectors. We've been sending them a catalog every 2 months for a year, and we've had numerous sales during that time, but then also had 2 additional sales now. And so I'm not going to disagree with you at all, Barney, that it takes time and effort and repetition. And, like I said, you've got to be willing to go in for the long haul if you're going to be doing anything like that. I would agree with Barney. That's not a strategy that I would suggest an artist pick right out of the bat, out of the gate, to just buy a list and start sending out images of artwork, because you probably don't have the resources or the longevity to stick with that long enough to make it successful.
It's something. It's useful. You've been in business for what, 13, 14 years. So you're established, and you can throw you can go after those secondary and tertiary potential options to get your work out there, and to make sales. But if you don't go after secondary things until you've built out your primary things, which in my case it would be websites, email marketing, building an email list, doing something with just getting well known in a couple of social media programs. That's kind of your core thing, making sure that you built out your local market. That's what you need to focus on first. Then you can start doing some of these other things that have potential for you, but not until you're thrown off some revenue and you're willing to say, okay, if this doesn't work, and it won't be the end of the world. I tried it and it didn't work out for me.
Yeah, and I think that points to, and maybe we'll wrap up on this. Some of the questions that have come in, and I think often it's the case when we're having these kind of discussions, there's a kind of frustration maybe, or even a little bit of desperation in some of the emails that come through, where there's a sense of, I need to start generating sales today. I need to be successful today. And what can you tell me that's going to be the magic bullet to make that happen? And the truth is that the art game is a long game. And what we're talking about, building relationships and getting your artwork out there, even building relationships with galleries and getting representation, all of that is long-term and strategic. And what's going to lead to your success is taking everything that we've talked about and starting to come up with strategies that allow you to do them all consistently and repeatedly. If you're looking at the art market as, I need to go from zero to making a living at this in a couple of months, that's going to be a real challenge for you. I don't know of any artists, and I certainly haven't worked with any artists who have gone from not selling anything to selling tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of work in a year. It's always been a process of years and years of building and cultivating relationships and generating those sales that leads to the long-term success. And so think about this in terms of not what can I do today to be successful, but what strategy can I start implementing today to start building relationships with people in my circle of influence? What can I start doing in terms strategically of asking for referrals and making sure that I'm asking for referrals on a consistent basis? What can I be doing to get into shows? How many should I be participating in? What can I be doing to build relationships with galleries? If that's going to be a strategy for me. And then taking all of those and just starting to chip away at them one day at a time and working towards building your success. And realizing that it is going to take a significant investment of your effort and energy and time to get to that point where you can say, I've made it. I'm at least paying for my expenses, and you know, I can say I'm a professional artist now.
I couldn't agree more. We should probably close on that and say that we will get back to the idea of the funnel. I think that we could do part 2 and part 3 and maybe part 4 on this, and just break down some even more specific ideas on how to find collectors in future broadcasts. And I will just suggest this to you, if you're listening to this, whether it's live or as a recording, get in touch with either Jason or me with ideas on things that you'd like to hear us present. We've been doing this for 3 years, and we probably have 2 years worth of ideas that we could come out with without even breaking a sweat. But we'd love to hear your thoughts and your feedback. If there's something that you think that we can benefit you by presenting it in this forum, please let us know.
Well, great way to end, and we'll look forward to hearing your suggestions, and we'll also look forward to seeing you in next month's session. Same bat time, same bat channel as far as our plans go right now. Thanks for joining us, everyone, and as always, we enjoy spending the time with you. We hope that it's helped you and helped you work towards building your success as an artist, and we'll look forward to seeing you in the next session. Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Barney.
You're welcome, Jason. Great to see you. Peace out, everyone.